time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely. Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is...
The anniversary celebration was meant to remind Britain of stability, sacrifice, and the sacred promise Charles made beneath the crown. Instead, one furious interruption shattered the ceremony in front of the royal family. Harry rose without warning, delivered an accusation no one expected, and left William visibly fighting back tears. Seconds later, Charles lifted one hand, stopped the music, dismissed the waiting officials, and brought the entire Coronation Anniversary event to a stunning halt. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry did not hesitate. During the private ceremonial portion at Westminster Abbey, he cut across Charles's address and accused William of abandoning him during the family's darkest period. The Coronation Anniversary was the remembrance of the king's crowning, a ceremony designed to renew the image of continuity around the throne. Yet instead of unity, the Abbey heard a brother refusing to sit down, refusing to soften his words, and refusing to let the moment continue as planned. William stayed still beside Catherine, but the stillness did not protect him. Harry's accusation landed with brutal force when he said his brother had chosen the crown over blood. The prince lowered his eyes, tightened his jaw, and fought to hold himself together. Catherine felt the change immediately. She looked toward him, then toward Harry, knowing the attack had reached far beyond public duty and into years of private pain. Charles gripped the lectern and watched both sons in silence. The king understood that he was no longer controlling a royal ceremony. He was standing between two wounded men while the meaning of the anniversary collapsed around them. He raised one hand, ordered the choir to stop, ended the procession, and instructed the congregation to remain seated as senior royals were moved into a side chamber. Harry had prepared for this. Before rising, he removed a folded card from his inside pocket and placed it on the bench beside him. That single gesture changed the outburst from an emotional explosion into something colder and more deliberate. When an equerry, a senior royal attendant responsible for supporting the sovereign during formal duties, retrieved the card, Charles stopped him at the chamber door and demanded it be handed over. The heavy door closed behind the king and his sons. William looked at his father, his voice unsteady, and whispered 5 words that changed the crisis. He knows what happened there. The ceremony had been stopped, but the deeper shock was only beginning, because Harry's accusation had struck a wound that William, Charles, and the palace had spent years trying to bury. Behind the Abbey's closed doors, the titles suddenly meant nothing. There was no Duke, no Prince of Wales, and no sovereign standing between them. Only a father watching 2 sons collapse beneath years of resentment. Harry paced beside a stone wall, still burning with anger. William sat with both hands locked together, unable to look at him. Charles remained between them, knowing that one wrong sentence could destroy whatever remained of their family. Harry stopped pacing and turned sharply toward his brother. "Look at me!" he demanded. The words carried more than anger. They carried years of feeling pushed aside, unheard during moments of crisis, and expected to remain silent while palace decisions changed how the world saw him. The palace was not merely a building in this struggle. It meant the royal household and the network of advisors controlling official duties, messages, and public roles. William slowly raised his eyes. The Prince of Wales, the title given to the direct heir to the throne, carried responsibilities that reached far beyond his own pain. He had Catherine and their children to protect, a future reign to prepare for, and a monarchy that could be weakened by every family wound becoming public. Yet in that chamber, none of those duties could shield him. His voice broke as he told Harry that every attempt to help had either been rejected, misunderstood, or exposed before trust could take hold. Catherine waited in the adjoining corridor, shaken by what she had seen inside the abbey. She reached for the handle once, then pulled her hand back. Moments later, she tried again but stopped herself. The princess understood that William needed her, but she also knew Harry might see her entrance as another wall closing around him. So she remained outside, carrying her fear in silence, while the argument continued beyond the door. Charles unfolded the card taken from the bench and studied it carefully. Several lines had been crossed out with hard strokes, leaving traces of words more damaging than anything Harry had spoken publicly. The king looked from the paper to his younger son, then back again. This had not been an uncontrolled explosion. Harry had arrived with a prepared accusation, revised before the ceremony but never truly softened. One sentence remained untouched. It referred to a private meeting at Sandringham, and claimed William had made a promise there before later denying it. Sandringham was the royal family's private country estate, often used for personal gatherings, away from formal palace life. Charles recognized the reference immediately. His fingers tightened around the card, and he folded it before either son could read his expression. Harry saw the change in his father, and fell silent. William noticed it too. In that instant, both brothers understood that the king remembered the promise, and that he might finally reveal what happened. To understand why one forgotten promise could reduce William to tears, the story must return to the private winter meeting that turned two wounded brothers into opposing sides. The rupture did not begin inside Westminster Abbey. It began months earlier, in a small Sandringham library, where the fire had nearly burned out and no aides were allowed inside. William and Harry sat opposite each other after midnight, speaking more honestly than they had in years. By the time they stood to leave, one promise had been made. Neither brother would allow private family pain to become a public weapon. Within 3 days, that promise was broken. Charles had arranged the meeting, after a tense family gathering, made another public collapse feel dangerously close. Sandringham, the royal family's private country estate, offered distance from the formal machinery of palace life. The king believed two brothers speaking without advisors, press teams, or written statements might still find a way back. William entered, determined to protect family confidentiality. Harry arrived wanting one thing first: an admission that decisions about his royal role had been made while his voice was ignored. Harry leaned forward and said he no longer trusted palace channels. He believed private concerns entered official offices and returned as cold decisions, stripped of emotion and presented as duty. William answered with equal force. The future king said trust could not survive when personal conversations repeatedly appeared in interviews, public accounts, or carefully timed statements. Neither man raised his voice at first, but every sentence carried years of accusation. Harry spoke of their mother as the last person who had understood how royal pressure could isolate someone while the world watched. William's anger softened, but his pain did not. He promised that her memory would never again be used to wound either brother. Harry gave the same promise. For one brief moment, they believed they had reached something stronger than agreement, a boundary neither would cross. 3 days later, everything collapsed. An internal Coronation Anniversary briefing described Harry as an unpredictable emotional risk and recommended keeping him away from the ceremony's most symbolic moments. The briefing was a private planning document used by royal staff to assign roles, manage timing, and prevent disruption during major events. Its language did more than limit Harry's participation. It reduced his pain to a security problem, and seemed to confirm every fear he had carried into Sandringham. Harry received a photographed copy through a former household contact. A handwritten mark beside the harshest recommendation appeared to be William's approval. The image arrived without explanation, but the message seemed clear. His brother had promised honesty in private and authorized humiliation in secret. William, however, had never seen that final page. His original review ended before the added recommendation. and the approval mark appeared only after his copy left his hands. The Abbey outburst was therefore not simply anger. It was Harry confronting William over evidence that appeared undeniable. Forcing the brothers toward a face-to-face reckoning, neither could escape. The chamber door shut, and Harry crossed the room before Charles could stop him. He placed the copied briefing on the table and pushed it toward William with a trembling hand. "Tell him the truth," he demanded. The Prince of Wales stared at the mark beside his name, then slowly looked toward his father. What followed was not a royal discussion shaped by protocol. It was a brother demanding confession, and another brother realizing he had been framed. Harry pressed one finger against the margin and said the mark proved William had approved his exclusion from the anniversary's most important moments. The Sandringham briefing was a private planning document used by senior royal staff to decide who would attend, speak, stand near the sovereign, and take part in symbolic parts of the ceremony. To Harry, the page was not administration. It was betrayal, written in cold language. William pulled the document closer and read every line. His expression changed when he reached the phrase describing Harry as emotionally dangerous. The future king knew the draft he had reviewed, and those words had not been there. He looked again at the approval mark beside his name, then at the recommendation, keeping his brother away from the ceremony's most visible moments. Someone had added both after the document left his hands. Harry stepped closer, until only a few feet separated them. He demanded to know why William had promised peace at Sandringham while preparing humiliation behind closed doors. The prince rose slowly, tears still visible, but anger hardening his voice. "Because I did not write that," he said. The denial landed sharply, but Harry had carried the page too long to surrender his certainty in one sentence. Harry struck the table with his palm. The copied briefing shifted between them, and Charles moved forward before the confrontation could break further. William did not step back. Instead, he admitted that he had stopped defending himself years earlier, because every explanation became another argument. Every private answer risked becoming public, and every attempt at peace seemed to open a fresh wound. Charles picked up the document and examined the mark. The king knew William's approval sign always included a short diagonal stroke, a small detail used on internal papers to confirm that a page had truly passed through his office. That stroke was missing. The mark looked convincing from a distance, but under careful review, it was incomplete. Charles then delivered the revelation from his own documented household records. Only 4 people had access to the final anniversary briefing. The family argument had become something far more dangerous, a deliberate act from inside the palace. The king ordered the original file brought immediately. Minutes later, his private secretary returned, pale and shaken. The anniversary archive had been opened, and the official document was gone. The brothers' confrontation had exposed a possible deception, but the missing original meant someone inside the palace still controlled the truth, and Charles now had to decide how far his authority would reach. Charles returned to the Abbey's robing room and closed the door behind him. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he removed his ceremonial gloves, placed them carefully beside the prepared anniversary speech, and gave an order that stunned his household. Every aide connected to the briefing was to surrender access credentials immediately. No statement would be released. No one would leave the Abbey complex until the missing original had been found. Charles now acted with the full authority of the sovereign. That meant he could cancel the remaining program, secure internal records, and question every official responsible for the ceremony. The decision mattered, because the anniversary had been designed to display stability. Admitting that a royal document had been altered would expose something far more dangerous than family tension: manipulation inside the king's own household. Charles read the copied page again, when the room emptied. His eyes stopped at the words describing Harry as an emotional risk. The king's shoulders lowered. Those words had taken his son's pain, stripped away every human detail, and turned it into an operational problem to be managed. Harry had made mistakes, but Charles knew the language had been chosen to provoke fear, not solve it. Camilla entered quietly and closed the door behind her. She urged him to resume a shortened ceremony, before the silence outside became impossible to explain. The Queen Consort, the wife of the reigning king, who supports the monarch without holding his constitutional authority, warned that a complete cancellation could create panic. Charles refused. He told her that celebrating the crown while his sons were being turned against each other would be an empty performance. Camilla saw the finality in his face and did not press him again. Security officers then delivered a documented access report from the Abbey archive system. The records showed that an assistant advisor had entered the archive room before dawn, using temporary credentials issued under another official's name. That same advisor had helped revise the seating plan and participation schedule after William reviewed the first draft. She had therefore touched both the altered briefing and the decision to keep Harry away from the ceremony's most symbolic moments. Charles ordered her brought to the robing room. The advisor entered pale but composed, with William's copied page already waiting on the table. The king asked one question: had she changed the wording? She looked at the document, then at him, and admitted that she had. The confession did not end the crisis. It deepened it. The advisor explained in a formally recorded conversation that she had acted after receiving a private verbal instruction from a senior royal office. She refused to name the person who gave it. Charles had found the hand that changed the page, yet her confession widened the danger, because the decision had not begun with an aide, but with someone powerful enough to remain unnamed. By afternoon, the abbey stood almost empty. The flowers remained in place, the anniversary programs lay untouched, and the final procession never began. Beyond the closed gates, guests waited for an explanation that did not come. Inside, William removed his ceremonial sash and sat alone in a preparation room. The future king had endured public attacks before, but this time the wound came from his brother, and from a system he had trusted to protect them both. Charles made the cancellation final. He ended the reception, the commemorative balcony appearance, and the official family photograph, leaving no room to disguise the crisis as a brief delay. The balcony appearance was the traditional moment when senior royals stood before the public after a major ceremony, while the family photograph was meant to preserve an image of unity. Losing both turned a private collapse into an unmistakable royal rupture. Guests left through separate exits, while palace communications staff drafted a short notice blaming a private family matter. The careful wording protected the brothers from immediate detail, but it could not hide the scale of what had happened. Senior officials had stopped answering questions. The abbey's ceremonial schedule had been abandoned. Every missing event now spoke louder than any statement. William sat on a wooden bench and covered his face with both hands. Catherine entered quietly and remained near him until he finally looked up. The prince told her Harry had believed the document because years of distance had made betrayal seem more believable than trust. He did not sound angry anymore. He sounded exhausted. Catherine knelt in front of him and told him his tears were not weakness. She reminded him that pain did not disappear simply because he was expected to become king. William admitted he was grieving the brother who once understood him without explanation, before every silence became suspicious and every disagreement became evidence of rejection. She held his hands as he struggled to steady his breathing. Charles suspended the assistant advisor and ordered a full internal review. An internal review was a formal palace investigation used to trace decisions, records, access, and responsibility inside the royal household. Yet the advisor continued protecting the senior office that had instructed her to sharpen the language, refusing to name the source even during a recorded follow-up interview. Harry received the findings from his father in a private conversation. Charles explained that the approval mark was almost certainly false, and that William had never seen the final page. Relief did not come. The Duke went silent, realizing his public accusation had wounded an innocent brother before an entire congregation. Harry prepared to leave through a private entrance, then stopped. He asked for one final meeting with William, without Charles, Catherine, lawyers, aides, or palace officials. For the first time that day, the crisis moved beyond documents and royal authority, leaving only two brothers in a room with nothing to hide behind. No officials entered the small Jerusalem chamber when Harry and William faced each other again. Charles waited outside. Catherine remained down the corridor. Even the guards stepped farther from the door. For several moments, neither brother spoke. Then Harry removed the copied briefing from his pocket, placed it between them, and admitted that he had wanted the page to prove his worst fears, because anger was easier to carry than the possibility that he had misjudged his brother. Harry asked for one condition before they continued. Nothing said in that room would be released in fragments, passed through aides, or used later to win public sympathy. William agreed. The Jerusalem chamber was a private historic room beside Westminster Abbey, often used for serious meetings away from public ceremony. Their agreement renewed the promise made at Sandringham, but this time both men understood exactly what breaking it had cost. William explained how palace drafts moved through several offices before becoming final. One team reviewed wording, another handled security, and another confirmed ceremonial roles. The prince had approved an earlier version that did not describe Harry as dangerous and did not remove him from the anniversary's symbolic moments. Someone had changed the page after his review, then copied his mark badly enough to deceive a wounded brother, but not a careful investigation. Harry lowered his eyes and apologized for attacking William inside the abbey. He admitted that invoking Diana had crossed the very boundary they had sworn to protect. His voice weakened when he spoke about the tears. The Duke said he had expected anger from his brother, perhaps even contempt, but seeing him break had stripped away the certainty that had carried him into the ceremony. William did not offer immediate forgiveness. He said the words spoken publicly could not be pulled back, and the image of their confrontation would remain long after the truth emerged. Yet the future king also accepted his share of the damage. Silence had become a habit. Distance had become protection. Together, they had created enough emptiness for a false document to feel believable. Harry then revealed the source through a private recorded account made for Charles's inquiry. A former household contact had sent the photograph anonymously, only hours before the ceremony. The timing left no room for verification, and pushed him toward an emotional reaction before anyone could challenge the page. William recognized the pattern immediately. Similar leaks had arrived before major royal moments, always carrying just enough truth to create distrust between separate households. This was not random. Someone had engineered the outburst. Before opening the door, Harry and William agreed to stand beside Charles when the king addressed the halted ceremony. It would not suggest perfect reconciliation. It would show something harder: two brothers choosing truth before pride. Their private agreement changed the meaning of the day, yet the world outside had already seen the celebration collapse and was demanding an explanation from the monarchy. By evening, one image had come to define the crisis: William lowering his head as Charles raised his hand to stop the anniversary ceremony, with Harry standing several feet away in stunned silence. The photograph appeared across television screens before the palace released a single explanation. It was not an image of royal confidence. It was a portrait of a father caught between two sons, and a future king unable to hide his pain. Broadcasters interrupted scheduled programs and repeated the same stunning fact: Charles had personally halted the Coronation Anniversary after an emotional confrontation between Harry and William. The anniversary marked the public remembrance of the king's crowning, and was meant to celebrate continuity, duty, and national stability. Its sudden collapse mattered, because the ceremony had been designed to show that the monarchy could rise above private wounds. Instead, those wounds had stopped it completely. The palace finally confirmed that the reception, balcony appearance, and family photograph had been cancelled. A formal statement also announced an internal investigation into unauthorized changes made to a ceremonial briefing, the private document used to assign roles and manage major royal events. The wording was controlled, but the meaning was explosive. Someone inside the household had helped turn two brothers against each other. Charles watched the coverage from a private sitting room and did not move when the photograph appeared again. The king's expression hardened as one commentator described the halted ceremony as proof that his family could not survive its own history. He lowered his eyes, wounded not only by the criticism, but by the possibility that millions now believed the same thing. Harry saw the image from another room. He watched William's face, heard the presenter describe the prince's tears, and switched off the television. Inside the abbey, his anger had felt justified. From the outside, the outburst looked painfully cruel. The Duke sat in silence, understanding that the truth might explain his actions, but could never erase their impact. Rain fell outside Buckingham Palace, as a quiet crowd gathered near the gates. One person stepped forward and placed 2 white roses beside the railings. A small card rested between them, with 7 words, "For the brothers Diana left behind." The gesture spread across social media within minutes and shifted the public mood from judgment toward grief. The following morning, a major newspaper placed the halted procession photograph across its front page, beneath the headline, "The Crown Stops for a Family in Pain." The story no longer centered only on scandal. It became a national conversation about what royal duty demanded from men who had never fully escaped loss. Charles knew a written statement would not be enough. He prepared to appear with both sons and deliver the only verdict that mattered. The public had witnessed the fracture, but Charles would not allow the final image to be one of separation. The king now intended to define the moment himself. The next afternoon, Charles entered the palace's white drawing room without a procession, fanfare, or ceremonial music. William stood on his right. Harry stood on his left. The distance between the brothers was still visible, but neither walked away. The king looked directly toward the cameras and explained that he had halted the anniversary because no celebration of duty could continue, while deception, pain, and mistrust were tearing his family apart. Charles then confirmed the truth the palace had spent the previous day uncovering. Unauthorized changes had been made to Harry's ceremonial briefing, and William had never approved the language used to restrict his role. The briefing was the internal document that guided duties, positions, and participation during the anniversary. Its alteration mattered, because one false mark had turned suspicion into certainty and family pain into public confrontation. The king announced that the advisor responsible had been permanently removed from royal service. The senior office behind the verbal instruction also lost authority over future family event planning, while new safeguards would require every final document to carry verified approval from each relevant household. Charles made the consequences clear. No rank, title, or private connection would protect anyone who used royal machinery to divide his family. Harry then broke his silence through the live recorded address. He apologized directly to William for confronting him, before learning the complete truth. The Duke did not excuse his anger or hide behind the forged document. He accepted responsibility for where he released that pain and admitted that his words inside the abbey had wounded his brother before the entire family. William answered with a small nod before speaking. The prince said reconciliation could not be commanded by the crown because a royal order could control ceremony but not rebuild trust. That work would require private honesty, patience, and actions strong enough to survive after the cameras disappeared. Harry listened without interruption. and the future king did not pretend forgiveness had already erased the damage. Charles delivered one final decision. The Coronation Anniversary would not be restaged. Instead, the money reserved for the cancelled reception would support organizations helping families facing grief, estrangement, and emotional crisis. The king turned a failed celebration into a public act of repair, giving the day meaning without pretending its pain had never happened. The cameras remained active after the formal address ended. Harry turned toward William and said a few words too quiet to hear. The prince paused, then placed one hand briefly on his brother's shoulder. Charles watched them leave together. The halted anniversary had not revealed a monarchy destroyed by emotion. It revealed a family nearly destroyed by secrecy, pride, and manipulation. Charles's strongest act of kingship was stopping the ceremony. William's tears exposed the human cost of being the heir, while Harry's apology marked the first honest step away from permanent separation. The crown endured because accountability finally replaced silence. There would be no second ceremony and no artificial display of perfection. The final image was enough: a father and two sons leaving the room together, wounded but no longer divided by a lie. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.